A very good evening, all. I am Aditi Lama with the Wednesday night edition of South Asian News, Vision of Asia. We are coming to you from a studio in New York City. Welcome to the show. Let's begin the episode taking a look at the coronavirus pandemic and its impact. The world has surpassed 112 million cases of coronavirus with nearly 2.5 million deaths. Here in the United States, we have reached a grim milestone of 500,000 COVID-19 deaths nationwide with more than 28 million cases. Today, the White House said that the Biden administration will deliver more than 25 million masks to community health centers, food pantries, and soup kitchens this spring to battle COVID-19. U.S. health authorities recommend mask wearing as a critical measure to help slow the spread of the disease, and many low-income Americans still don't have access to them. So, the government will be delivering 15 million Americans no-cost, high-quality, and washable masks. This is happening when COVID variants are sweeping across the nation. Even as new cases of the virus are dropping, experts worry about a fourth surge of the coronavirus. So please do continue to follow CDC guidelines. In politics, President Joe Biden held a virtual bilateral meeting with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on COVID-19 response, economic cooperation, and other shared interests. Meanwhile, nominations for the president's cabinet see a little halt with South Asian American nominee Neera Tanden. On the show tonight, we discuss more on politics and coronavirus pandemic. Here are the headlines. Epidemiologist Dr. Aarti Agarwal on coronavirus updates and vaccines, New York City. Emergency Department Dr. Anuj Vora on Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine updates and measures, Connecticut. Veteran journalist Rohit Vyas on Biden cabinet nominee and stimulus package, New Jersey. It's time for a short break on Vision of Asia South Asian News segment. We'll be right back. And welcome back. I am Aditi Lama and this is Vision of Asia Wednesday night episode of South Asian News. Let's take a look at coronavirus updates and measures. This week, we have hit a grim milestone of COVID-19 deaths crossing 500,000 with more than 28 million cases. This is happening while the trajectory of new cases and deaths by COVID-19 is going downwards. However, experts worry COVID-19 variants can cause a shift in the downward trend and lead to a fourth surge of the coronavirus. So continue wearing your mask and social distancing. On vaccines, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration said Johnson & Johnson's single-dose COVID-19 vaccine meets requirements for emergency use authorization. A committee will hold an all-day meeting on Friday to review, and if approved, this vaccine could be a game-changer in the vaccination program. Bringing more insight into the Johnson & Johnson vaccine and the pandemic, we spoke with Medical Director of Emergency Services, Dr. Anuj Vora. Here is Dr. Vora. Right, and that is such an important, word of wisdom right there. Take care of yourself. Let's go and talk about the vaccines because I have a lot of questions. Today, the biggest news has to do with Johnson & Johnson. The FDA says that it has met criteria for its approval. It's calling it safe and effective. My first question to you is, the vaccine only has 66% efficacy in comparison to the 95 or 96% that we're seeing in Moderna or Pfizer. How are you looking at this vaccine when you look at the efficacy, and is it enough for us to start taking it?
Well, let's simplify it. If someone said, hey, I can give you medicine A, and there's a 95% chance you'll get better, or you could take medicine B, and there's a 65% chance you'll get better, what would you go with? You'd always go with the higher efficacy one. Now, just because the FDA is starting to give a thumbs up on it doesn't mean that it's as good or better than the other medications. And as we talked about briefly, if the efficacy has not been proven to be as strong, I probably wouldn't take it personally until more testing is done.
Right. And, they did do a large trial, doctor, and they have done this trial during the second part of the pandemic. Do you think that's why maybe the efficacy is low, because we are seeing variants and, the disease itself has evolved over time?
I think part of it is also that Johnson & Johnson is being studied as a single-dose medication versus the other carriers that have had double doses. So it's different in that regard. The time period in which it's being tested upon shouldn't make a huge difference. And Johnson & Johnson didn't just start working on this. They've been working on this for over a year now. I just think that they're working on a single dose versus the double dose that we've been seeing to this point. So I still think that more studies have to be done. And I'd like to see the efficacy go higher in comparison to the other vaccinations that have been approved and given throughout this country and worldwide. So I think we just need to give it a little more time and see what they come out with.
So Johnson & Johnson is trying to study now a 2-dose regimen, basically adding what they're saying booster shots to their vaccination. Could you explain what they mean by that?
So right now we're seeing the distribution of vaccine being given as two shots. If you get the first shot, you might have a 60 or 65% prevention of COVID. After the second shot with Moderna or Pfizer, then you're up to almost 95%. So if, let's say, Johnson & Johnson is suggesting a single dose that gets you to the 60s in terms of efficacy, the boosters should get you higher, as if you're getting a second vaccine. Think of it as your children that get vaccinated, the measles, mumps, and rubella. You can't just get one shot and be immunized. You have to get multiple shots to boost up your immunity within your body, because all of these medications work differently. It's not the medication where you can just take a pill or take a shot and boom, you're cured of disease. It requires multiple doses to get your body to the portion where it is able to fight the virus with a strong enough efficacy, meaning 95% of the time, if you're exposed to it, you should be fine.
Right. While talking about vaccines, now I'd like to ask you about AstraZeneca. It has been approved by the World Health Organization. They've already started distributing it, but it was stopped in South Africa due to the South African variant. What insight do you have in this vaccine? Do you think that it could get passed here in the US?
It's tough to say. I would say right now, if you have access to the most tested vaccines, I would stick with that for now, as these newer vaccines that come out that might be better in the long run are tested further to prove that they're safe and as effective. Now, I'm not supporting one company over another. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying that if Moderna and Pfizer have already proved to have almost a 95% efficacy, and the other companies have not been close to that as of yet, I would give them more time to get their studies further evaluated.
Right.
Just because someone is approved by a Food and Drug Administration or other regulatory company doesn't mean that it's as good as other medications out there. And we should expect to see even other manufacturers coming out with vaccines in the near future that could prove to be less efficacious, better, or the same. So only time will tell. But I think it's great that all of these companies are working so hard to try and find a cure for this illness.
And when you're looking at Moderna and Pfizer, doctor, a lot of news that we're getting is to speed up the vaccination process, perhaps you can mix the two doses. So perhaps you can get one dose of Moderna and then your second dose could be from Pfizer. How are you looking at that? Is that feasible?
To this point, it has not been recommended to do that. If you started with one, you should stick with one. For example, I got the first shot of Moderna, and I was recommended to get the second shot of Moderna. I think that needs to be studied further before it is performed, and I wouldn't recommend that at this time. If you're starting with one medication from one company or manufacturer, stick with that.
More on coronavirus updates and measures. On vaccine rollout, the White House has said that the U.S. states will receive about 14.5 million vaccine doses this week, marking 70% increase in distribution over the last month. The White House also said governors were told that a number of doses sent directly to pharmacies will increase by 100,000 this week. This comes as the demand of vaccines exceeds the supply, and the Johnson & Johnson single-dose COVID-19 vaccine brings in a ray of hope. The company hopes to supply 100 million vaccine doses by the end of June. And CVS and Walgreens drugstores will start vaccinations in more states starting Thursday, citing additional doses delivered from the federal government. More on vaccines and the need to speed up the process, we have now another segment of our conversation with epidemiologist Dr. Aarti Agarwal. Here is Dr. Agarwal. Right. Doctor, when you're looking at people that have been vaccinated already, a big question that's coming out is what can they do after they have been vaccinated? Could grandparents visit their grandchildren at this point if they have been vaccinated? Could you go away with wearing a mask? Could you travel more easily if you're vaccinated? How do you look at those individuals?
So after you're vaccinated, it's really important to know that you're really only immune after, you're 2 weeks out from your second dose. And then you can consider yourself immune for at least, a period of 90 days. And so there have been some regulations that have been eased up, such as quarantine regulations. So if you are vaccinated and you're in that period of you're 2 weeks out, but you're still within 90 days of receiving the vaccine, you do not have to quarantine anymore if you're exposed to a COVID positive person. So that's really been a big change in policy. But right now, we're still recommending that you still continue to social distance. You still continue to, wear a mask when you're in public, or really not amongst your regular, household members. So we're still encouraging, everyone to not let down their guard, and really still continue to be careful, especially when you're around people who are high risk.
Right, and just talking about the mask, Dr. Anthony Fauci, one of the nation's leading health experts, actually stated that Americans may be wearing masks up until 2022. Your comments on that, and also how important do you think is double masking right now?
So I do think that with the variants emerging and questionable, vaccine efficacy with those variants, it is, I think that it's prudent to continue wearing a mask. I really don't think that there's any harm in it, and that it can only protect, yourself and others from being infected. So I do think that, Dr. Fauci is correct in his prediction that we are going to be continuing to wear masks for quite some time. As far as double masking, you can do that to be more careful. I think what is really important is making sure that you're wearing a mask that fits snugly on your face. So you want to have a good seal on your mask, and double masking can certainly be effective if you want to wear a disposable mask and then a cloth mask, over it. It will provide more protection. I think that what they've seen is that some of the cloth masks that have been that people have been using are not necessarily as effective as using a mask that has a little bit more protection, or more layers.
Right. And it's so, again, important for all our viewers to wear your mask and follow those 3 guidelines of social distancing, hand washing, and wearing a mask. Another big issue, doctor, concerning vaccination is actually a debate about schools opening. The CDC has said that the schools can safely open up even without vaccinating the educators and the teachers of that school. A lot of teachers and educators are concerned about it because so far they've been trying to keep themselves safe, and they can, get the virus from the children, or it could be transmitted across the school. How are you looking at this? What advice could you give to these individuals? And also, what advice could you give to just general public on this?
So, as far as school opening, schools can be safely opened as long as they're implementing mitigating strategies such as masking, social distancing, all of the other things like contact tracing, cohorting, to reduce transmission in that community. What we've seen so far is that transmission within schools has been very, very low for those schools that have opened. Now, I do think that teachers and school staff and faculty should be prioritized for vaccination, but I don't think that they all need to be vaccinated prior to opening school.
Right. What is your take on domestic travel, doctor? I know the administration right now is trying to make a pathway where perhaps everybody traveling should be vaccinated and they have to show that proof. How do you think that could affect, coronavirus across the nation?
So currently, I don't think that we can require people to be vaccinated to travel just because it's not available to all adults. So domestic travel can occur with the current precautions in place, such as masking, hand hygiene, social distancing. In some cases, some states may require testing, as they have, and quarantine if you're coming from an area of high transmission. But once vaccination is more widely available, I think that we can think a little bit more deeply about those types of policies being implemented.
I just have 2 more questions left here for you, doctor. The first question has to do with South Asians at high risk. We've seen it throughout this pandemic that South Asians have been impacted by this disease. Other communities of color also have been impacted by this disease a little bit more. What is your advice to South Asians at high risk right now? And how concerned are you about the interaction between these comorbidities and COVID-19?
So certainly many South Asians are at high risk for COVID-19 and really the severe outcomes due to the high prevalence of diabetes, hypertension, and other chronic diseases. So my advice to them, again, is really to not let down your guard right now. Continue to social distance, wear your mask when you're out in public, hand hygiene, just those basic things that we've been doing. I feel like there's a lot of COVID fatigue out there. I think everyone is really feeling that. People want to travel, people want to, really see their extended families and such. But my advice is to, continue taking precautions, get vaccinated when you're eligible and when vaccine is available to you. However, I would say, don't delay seeking medical attention if you need it, and maintain caring for your chronic illnesses and seeking preventative care as well. It has been a whole year that we're into this pandemic, and so we can't continue postponing or delaying care. It's really important that you continue to take care of yourself.
Right. And finally, my last question to you, doctor, I wanted to ask you, as a doctor and as an epidemiologist, what is your biggest concern right now? And what is the biggest advice you could give to the public?
My biggest concern, I think, is really about the variants that may be emerging. I think that everyone is really hopeful that between the vaccines that are available and even these, monoclonal antibodies that are available for treatment of non-severe disease, there seems like there's light at the end of the tunnel, which I really hope that there is. But I think my greatest concern is really these emerging variants and how that's going to shift what we're seeing as far as cases, and whether there may be another surge of coronavirus coming our way. But I'm really hoping that the vaccines will continue to be effective against these strains, and that we'll be able to get things under control very soon.
Well, it's time for another short break on Vision of Asia, Voice of the Community. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I am Aditi Lama, and this is Vision of Asia South Asian News segment. Let's now take a look at U.S. politics and updates. On the ongoing hearings for the cabinet positions, 2 Senate committees have postponed meetings scheduled for today on President Biden's pick for the budget director, South Asian American Neera Tanden. They suggested that she may not have the votes to be approved and may become the first high-profile Biden nominee to be rejected. Her nomination for head of the Office of Management and Budget has come into scrutiny after Democratic Senator Joe Manchin said that he would not vote for her, and 2 Republicans seen as potential yes votes became no's over her past comments on social media. Neera Tanden has made some critical comments on Twitter about Republicans as well as Democrats. More on Neera Tanden we have now in a segment with ITV Go's senior political commentator, Mr. Rohit Vyas. Here's what he shared on Neera Tanden and the Biden administration COVID-19 relief package. Another nomination which is, turning out to be quite controversial deals with South Asian woman Neera Tanden. She has been nominated for administration's budget office, which plays a huge role in the country, in the government. Why do you think she's getting such a slack for her Twitter comments? And do you think it's fair to judge her based solely on Twitter?
Yeah, now this is a good question, but it's also very understandable, the backlash against Neera Tanden. This is the Office of Management and Budget, a crucial funding division of the U.S. government, which will decide a number of things that happens. Neera Tanden, unfortunately, has had a history. She is a Democrat, a diehard Democrat, obviously. But the problem is she has let a lot of it go into her personal comments, right? So she has been particularly acerbic toward Republicans that she doesn't like or didn't like. One of them, being a case in point, Ted Cruz. She has used some very strong language against Senator Ted Cruz, the junior senator of Texas. She has been seen as a far-right liberal Democrat with particularly distasteful views of conservatives. So she is not going to be able to function in a bipartisan fashion, as people would like officials who are confirmed by the Senate to perform. She's going to have a tough time, in my opinion, when her nomination was announced. I figured this was the one nomination that would have a tough time sailing through. Because don't forget, it's even a Democrat who's a conservative, Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia, who has already said, he said last week, that he does not intend to confirm her nomination. He will not support it. So that tells you that conservatives from both parties, and there are conservatives in the Democratic Party, consider her a little too off the wall, if you will, sort of the Donald Trump on the other side, okay? To many, Donald Trump was the extreme, Republican with his own brand of GOP ideology and all the rest of it. She's seen pretty similarly on the other side of the coin. And so it's going to be very hard for her to get nominated. They'd have to, the Biden team would have to get at least one other Republican, if not two, to get onto their side, which I don't think is going to happen.
And what happens if she doesn't get nominated?
If she doesn't get nominated, there'll be a replacement. Already the nominee for Deputy OMB Director is the one who's going to be out there. There are a couple of other names. She will probably be given a post within the administration that does not require a Senate confirmation. So I'd expect her then to become some kind of advisor, because she is close to the current chief of staff, Robert Klain. They're very good friends. They've known each other a long, long time. It's Klain who pushed this nomination forward. And I expect that she will get some kind of advisory role, some kind of counseling role within the administration that does not require confirmation by the full Senate. But it won't be a cabinet role. Being a cabinet member of the cabinet is a bit different, is significantly different from just being an advisor or whatever, because you're not in on every single thing. As a member of the cabinet, you are up there. You got the president, the vice president, and the cabinet. And so it's a big deal. It will be a big blow to her, but at the same time, she will get some kind of position, I expect, in the Biden administration.
Yeah, these hearings are surely very interesting. They are turning around, and you just never know what's happening with which nominee. Finally, I'd like to discuss with you the $1.9 trillion COVID-19 relief package by the Biden administration. Yesterday, there was a push to take it forward, and I believe by March 14th, they are hoping to get it signed. Can you give us an insight into what's exactly happening with this package, and what are going to be the next steps that the Congress and the Senate takes?
Well, it was passed. It's going to be passed, I think, this weekend, coming weekend by the House. What happens is you have the preliminary settings of how this will work. What are the appropriation components of the $1.9 trillion? You have people discussing, mainly Democrats, increasing it from 1.9 trillion to 2.1, for instance, and making it an even bigger package, etc. All that is deliberated in the House, then voted on in the House, and then will be sent to the Senate. Now, the administration has already made it clear that they're not going to wait for Republicans to support them. They'd like support of the Republicans. President Biden has personally said so. He would like this to have bipartisan support. He's also said he would like everyone to realize you got to act big now. This is not the time to talk about deficits or anything like that, because interest rates are at zero. So let's get this thing going now. If we have to to build up a deficit, that's fine. Let's go do it, but get the action out there. So I think it's going to pass. The previous bill expires, I think, the 13th of March, and that's why they have to get this out and approved before that deadline, because all the expanded unemployment benefits, all the expanded stimulus packages, everything like that, all of it ends on the 13th of March. And in order to avoid an interruption that is the one that occurred during the last time when President Trump refused to sign till the 27th of December, till after the whole thing was over. The previous bill before that had expired and then led to numerous delays in all the states to hand out payments. I think they want to avoid that and going to try and push this as quickly as possible. By next week, you're going to see a lot of action on this measure.
Well, this wraps up our show for the night. Please send us your suggestions and get your voices and organizations on our show. Email us on events@itvgold.com or follow us on Facebook at itvgold. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel for free access to many of our popular shows. Thank you for joining us tonight from Queens, New York. This is Vision of Asia, and I am Aditi Lamba. Take care and be well.